Hello, and thank you for tuning in. We are delighted to have you join us for an artist talk with the wonderful Charlene Vickers. This is a special event as part of Griffin Art Project celebrations for National Indigenous Peoples Day and National Indigenous History Month. My name is Bahar Mahazabnia, and I'm the Assistant Curator of Engagement at Griffin Art Projects. At Griffin, we would like to thank North Vancouver Recreation and Culture and the Variety Foundation for their continuing support of our public programs. The Governor General of Canada proclaimed June 21st as National Indigenous Peoples Day in 1996, marking an occasion for Canadians to come together, reflect on, and celebrate the traditions and knowledges of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. In celebration of this day, Griffin Art Projects conducts programming featuring Indigenous artists to highlight their perspectives, stories, and artistic practices. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that our work at Griffin takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations, to whom we are deeply grateful. As a first-generation settler of Iranian descent, I have been privileged to live, play, study, and grow on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples for the past 22 years. This time has deepened my appreciation for the rich cultural heritage, enduring stewardship, and profound resilience of these communities. Acknowledging the ongoing impacts of colonization, I strive to honor and respect the sovereignty and traditions of the First Nations whose lands I occupy. To genuinely enact decolonization, there is a collective responsibility to support Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. This includes advocating for the return of land and resources, respecting and uplifting Indigenous governance, and continuously challenging and dismantling the structures of oppression established by colonial forces that exist in the structures of our governments to this very day. Before introducing our speaker, Charlene Vickers, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to Charlene for taking the time to share her practice and her thoughts with us today. We are honored to have her here to provide insights into her creative practice, her process, and to discuss her work in the exhibition Prop House, a collection of 1 million objects at Griffin until August 18th. In addition to discussing Prop House, Charlene will also share insights into other projects and installation works, including the Ovoid Installation currently at the Libby Leshgold Gallery at Emily Carr University in Vancouver. I'd now like to introduce Charlene. Charlene Vickers is a Vancouver-based artist from the Wauzhushk Onigum Anishinaabe First Nation in Kenora, Ontario. Raised in Toronto and living in the West Coast since 1990. Charlene employs a wide array of materials in her practice, including painting, sewn fabric assemblages, and wooden object. Her use of these diverse mediums reflects a deep engagement with both traditional Anishinaabe crafts and contemporary art forms. Through her performances and music, she bridges these cultural elements, transforming her pieces into living expressions of history and healing. Her most recent exhibitions include Memory Flowers for Will Sampson at Diana, New York in 2023, Diviners Healers at Macaulay & Co. in Vancouver in 2023, Ancestral Gesture at the Contemporary Art Gallery in Vancouver in September 2021, and group exhibitions include Indian Theater, curated by Candace Hopkins at the C.C. Bard Hessel Museum of Art in Hudson, New York in 2023, Reverberations, Contemporary Art and Modern Classics at the Seattle Art Museum in 2023, Big Foot Forward, curated by Kitty Scott at Art Ontario in 2023, Big Blue Smudge at the University of Saskatchewan in 2022, Rain Shadow at the Nanaimo Art Gallery in 2021, and Where Do We Go From Here at the Vancouver Art Gallery in 2020. And without further ado, I will pass it on to Charlene.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I kind of forget that I've done all that. I have been an active artist for the past 4 years. Anyhow, thank you very much. And it's lovely to be here. And I'm also a person who's been living on Coast Salish land, and particularly the North Shore, where Griffin Art Projects is also located for the past 5 or 6 years. So it's like something that I'm like really noticing an importance for me to be here and to be living in Vancouver. And I've made my home here for the past 30 years. So um, it's something that's very important for me in terms of figuring out who I am as Anishinaabe Kwe and what my history is and what my personal history is in terms of finding identity and reconnecting with my own sense of cultural identity and cultural practice and artistic practice as well. So it's like really being a really essential part in that formation and that reconnection and reclamation of like who I am, because a lot of I don't usually share this about myself and as a personal history, but my background is I was part of the 60s scoop, and I grew up with a non-Indigenous family, a white settler family in Toronto, Ontario. And so I've been apart from my community for like my whole life, and I have not gone back either. So it's like there still is like a lot of work for me to do and a lot of reconnection for me to do within my lifetime. So um, yes. So I'm just like thinking about like Salish land and with your introduction and thinking how wonderful it is to to be here and like to I was just thinking of the other day, this me and my partner, we go over to Cap Cap Mall and Park Royal Mall, and those are the places we hang out together. And so the other day, there's a lady who went by, these two Indigenous young people went by, and this lady is wearing a shirt that said Burrard Canoe Club on the back, right? And it had this really awesome West Coast traditional design. I don't know by who, I didn't ask. But I was thinking, like, they look really like I was like, going, who are they? Like, I want to go and say hi and like figure out what is this Burrard Canoe Club. So I looked it up online. And I was like, going, hey, that's like something that I'd like to do is like be out in the water and they talk about like learning traditional sort of like practices and protocols of like being in the canoe and learning like the teachings of the canoe. I think that would be really exciting. Anyhow, that's just a little story. That's my little offshoot story here. Um, my work, and I'm an active artist. So quite often I'm working on multiple projects and have multiple things going on. So I was just gonna like concentrate on like two works that I've been working on this spring. And one is, like you said, my sewn ovoid works. I've brought them together in a big wall installation at the Libby Leshgold Gallery here in Vancouver at the Emily Carr campus. And that's a group show with Wally Dion and Catherine Blackburn and curated by Dana Warren. So it's a really beautiful show, and if you have the opportunity to go and see it, it's just incredible. Not that like I'm saying that my own work is incredible or anything. I'm talking about like the whole show and how it's all come together and just the notion of because it's sort of based on sewing practices and fiber and materials and gestures and cultural sort of activities of sewing and beading and quilt making in a really contemporary way. So it's like I think about that work, and the whole of the show is this notion of small actions and small parts coming together and then making something big, right? Making a big statement. So I think it's a really interesting show in that regard. So if you have a chance to go and see it, please do. So I was just going to start talking about that show right off the bat. I'm just going to screen share or attempt to screen share. Or I am screen sharing. It says I'm screen sharing right now. Okay, so here we are. Ta-da! This is me saying ta-da! I finished my installation, and I was getting ready for the opening. So this wall was very intimidating for me, and if you know the Libby Leshgold Gallery, the walls are a good 30 feet high, and so I've got all of these small sewn works in felt, and they have a lot of embroidery and beading on them, and I've been working on this series since like 2017. So it's something that I've been exploring and working on, the ovoid shape, which is a Northwest Coast shape in their art and culture. And so it's something that I've been working on, trying to develop and trying to develop in a way that is sort of relating to my own interests in, I don't know, like creatures and color and combinations of paint and materials. And so it's something that um, I've got uh, I've got like a vested interest in it, and I've been working on it for a while, and they've really grown. They've really grown a lot. So I'm just gonna start back at the beginning here of my little presentation. If you hear mewing, it's my little kitties at the door. So um, yeah, so when we were like talking about having this show back in the fall, my friend Dana Warren, who actually is somebody I've known for a good 20 years, and she actually curated my first show here in Vancouver. So that's really exciting to be working with her. I've worked with her several times before, and since that time, and so it's exciting to work together again. And she is excited too because this is her first show curating in Vancouver in like over 10 years. Right. So it's like we're like reunited and it feels so good. Anyhow, so we work really well together, and this when she asked me, I'm like going, well, I think I've got like 100 pieces already. And so then since then, I've been sort of like working away on some more. And in the show itself, I think there's about 135 works, individual works, and they're all hand sewn and they're all beaded and embroidered and all hand cut by myself. So there's no assistance from studio assistants, and it was just mostly like, oh, well, how are we going to install them? And that was a challenge. So we got together in my studio and hung out and put a couple of big tables out and brought them all out and put them on the tables and started to sort through like what we thought were like the things that were going together. If there was like some sort of like things that were like commonalities and that kind of thing. Because they're like extremely colorful and vibrant, and I tend to like want to work in a way where it's like, oh, I think every single thing is different. So it's like it has to be different. Like I try to replicate various works, and then it's like, oh, it's different again. So we're just working on, here we are, like this is the hallway or the lobby of my studio building, and we're just like working on, oh, like, well, we could put, this is our plan of attack, let's say. And then when it came to the actual day of like putting the work up in the gallery, I had gone to dress sew before we started, and I found this really amazing textile, and it's like wolves, they're howling at the moon. And the sky is like whoosh, like that. It's like Indigenous Starry Night. So I'm like going, well, I gotta have some of that. So I grabbed it, and I put it out when we were like doing our install, and I've been like at first I was thinking, oh, it's just gonna be our mascot, like these wolves are our mascot. And then I was like, oh no, like there's something more happening here. So this is my studio setup of what the ovoids are. And it's kind of like, oh well, this is how I organize them in my studio. It's like very kind of like, oh, like do like that. So when it came to like the install at the Libby Leshgold, I had like a number of Indigenous students um, come and help us with the install. And so what I wanted was there to be like a real lot of like lots of energy and flow and a dynamic sort of composition of the ovoids on the wall. So so then I was like saying, okay, so I don't want them to be going do 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 do. I'm like, I want them to go woo. Okay. Okay. So what I was gonna do before I just kind of I was gonna like read out my artist like this I wrote this little artist statement that's sort of like a mini essay. So it's not too long. I'm not gonna bore everyone. But as I read it, I'm gonna like click through some of my slides. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, the art ovoids are existential markers, an homage via repetitive cutting, stitching, beading, and color compositions in felt, thread, and beads, made over 7 years in my studio in Vancouver. The Ovoid works. The Ovoid works resound my presence as Anishinaabe Kwe, living here on the West Coast for 30 years. My ovoids are non-traditional. So they're renditions. They're renditions. They're like covers of songs, let's say, right? And so my renditions of the ovoids, they're like singular entities. They're not like part of like an overall composition of like an animal or a crest or anything like that. They're just like singular. Um, so I'm inspired. Um, Everyone knows I'm inspired by Lawrence Paul, Yakwil Upton, and also Sunny Asu. And I'm friends with Phil Gray and Corey Bulpett. So my renderings of the ovoid are, as I said, are non-traditional, meaning that they're not situated in traditional teachings. So my expression and exploration of the ovoid is based in contemporary art, and it, as I said before, is a form of homage. My sewn ovoids are coming from a personal subjective place and are influenced by personal histories of urban experience, cultural dislocation, and healing. The ovoids resound as colorful, individually hand-sewn, beaded, embroidered from felt and fabric, becoming part of my daily studio practice. So my actions of sewing and beading are part of my expression as an artist and have further become part of my identity as Anishinaabe Kwe. The sewn ovoids are an extension of another sewing project that I have been involved with in the past, which are the sewing of moccasin works and boot works out of beer cartons. And so what I find is interesting about sewing is how your presence of your body and your actions of your body become part of the work, and they become a site of conceptual building that is also part of my cultural identity, but it's also like a sort of like a temporal, sort of spatial. Um, it's like it's part of who I am and how I've been living here on the West Coast. That's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, but so there's a lot of fun and there's a lot of sort of like creatureness and creaturehood that I have in my work with these ovoids. And they really do, I really do. Like I work on them every day, a little bit every day. So it's like they sort of, I like to say that they keep me company in the studio, right? And yeah, so it's really part of who I am. So so my sewn objects are an act of making part of what I call embodied territory. So it's like uh, who I am and my history as Anishinaabe and my reclamation of my identity. It's all part of that embodied territory, right? So it's like, even though I've been living apart from where I am and from my birth territory, that place is still there within me, right? It's within who I am. It's in my it's in my cellular structure, let's say. So I think that how I approach the ovoid and this embodied expression of my territory is like it comes from like a humble place. And it's like it also sort of it does reach back to my upbringing and where I grew up with my family, because my father was quite a collector of art and had a lot of art books, and so we had like a lot of Northwest Coast art in the house. And so it's like something that was part of my visual sort of experience growing up. So there was like above our above our fireplace was like a big print by Tony Hunt. It was like a Thunderbird print of Tony Hunt by Tony Hunt. And so and I had like already sort of like an interest in and being an artist in making work and figuring out like, oh, this is what I'd like to do, is be like a creative person in my future. And so I think with my my use, or I don't know if I want to say use, my embodiment. I don't know if I can even say embodiment of what the ovoid is. It's my making in my involvement, let's say involvement with the ovoid. My involvement with the ovoid is a humble one, and it just reflects my own personal history of being here on the West Coast and like living in Vancouver. And I kind of stopped on this one because this is one of my favorite ones I made this spring. And he's like made of he's painted, like, so that's like a new thing for me. Like I painted on him, and he kind of looks like the Starry Night owl. And then this one here is I think this one is kind of like the cannibal man or the Wendigo man. So, and then I see like these sort of things coming down, almost like they look like stitches, but they also look like rain. So it's like sort of there's some sort of story that's happening. that's still revealing itself to me. And then it's kind of like I said before, I like to sort of have something new happening and kind of going back and forth. So with this is something I made like within the same sort of period as making that last work, and it's very different, but it kind of relates to the work at the Griffin Art Projects for the Prop House show. Right, I just have this little video here of us setting up the work with the students. That would be a nice for scale. And we had like we didn't use the cherry picker lift, but we did use the super tall ladder. Pardon the pixelations. So like when I was installing with the students, I was really letting go of my own, like I didn't really have that much of a vision of what it was going to be up on the wall and how we would do it. And it was actually one of the students that sort of like suggested, oh, we could have like a bigger one and then some smaller ones around it, like a circle, right? And then we could have several circles that sort of come in together. And then I like brought out the wolf and the swirling sky, and I was like, oh well, we could like have these circles sort of swirling in and out of each other, and then it would be like a constellation and sort of a starry night feel, but with ovoids. And here we are. Here we are. I feel like this picture kind of looks like I don't know if you know that animation with Mickey Mouse and Fantasia. It's like, okay. So then, yeah, so then I've got the up here, the up in the top center, the gingham checkerboard picnic table sort of pattern, and that relates to the project, which really both these projects came together at the very same time. So the work at the Griffin Art Projects, which I'm gonna present next, it was being made at the same time that this work was being put together, and they opened within 2 weeks of each other. So it's kind of like two locations, but I feel like there's a lot of relationship between the two. Now I'm just gonna look for my folder for the pictures of the Griffin. This work is called She Listens for Her Voices, and it's about my mom. So with this work, the Prop House exhibition of 1 million objects, uh, curated by Paul Wong and Lisa Baldessera. Um, we were like taken on a tour of like all of two large warehouses of antiques and collectibles a family had accumulated. And then we were given permission to borrow any of the items and make an artwork out of it. So what before we even went over to see the items or the warehouse of stuff, um, I read the curatorial statement, and the first thing that popped into my head was the story of my mom, and she has a Hoosier kitchen cabinet, much like this one here. This isn't the actual one, but so this this time that I was living with her, uh, it popped into my head, and I was thinking I could try to recreate the story that she had, where she had like an actual like encounter with like a a voice from another space or realm, like it's a spirit realm. So the story goes, my mom, I was like in my bedroom and my mom was in the kitchen. It was a Saturday and she was like making pies. And she doesn't usually make pies, you know, so she was at her Hoosier cabinet and she's making pies and apple pies. And so I don't know what I was doing, but she came into my bedroom. She's like going, well, I don't mean to like upset you or freak you out. And I'm like, what? And so anyhow, she's like going, I'm in the kitchen and I'm making pies. And then all of a sudden I hear a voice right beside me say, I sure am glad somebody is making pies on my Hoosier again. It was just like, oh, really? So she was having like she had unlocked some sort of portal for this voice to arrive and say they must have owned the Hoosier before or sometime long ago, and they're happy that she was being happy making pies on the Hoosier. So it's just like I was like, okay, so I would like to make this. I would like to recreate this story, and I do when we were going to go and check out the items for in the warehouse. I was like, oh well, I drew a little picture of like what it looked like. And so we went and we found they had like three Hoosiers. So it's just like I'm like going, okay, well, I picked one out and then we went around and looked for like all these items that uh, would relate to things that I remember my mom having on her Hoosier, like like pie plates and scoops and my mother, she's got cookbooks and she's got these ceramic jars, and then she's got these old glass antique jars that she keeps in there. The only thing I didn't get to put into my display was like my mom would have like a little basket of cat food. So that's the only thing I didn't put in it. Um, so there's various elements to tell the story of my mom and the voice that spoke to her. And she does have like these moments where I was thinking that it would be great to have this project be about her and be about our relationship and the amount of time that I've been living out here on the West Coast. So it's a lot about me going back and forth to visit her, and then it's also about her writing me letters and postcards, and then just like the general care of each other. So this is something that I think is really an interesting sort of thing to present as research, right? So it's like personal research, and she's like also involved in the project in that when I called her on the phone because she's still around and we still talk on the phone. So I talked to her and told her what I was going to do, and that I'm like, oh, well, can you describe to me, like, what, tell me the story again, right? So she told me the story again, and then that like opens up all of her memories of different times that she's heard voices, right? So she hears like a voice. We'll be sitting together and just enjoying sitting in a park or something like that, and she'll hear something and she thinks I've said something, and I'd be like, no, I haven't said anything, right? And she'd be like, I heard someone say something to me. And so she's just had like various experiences, some frightening and some really peaceful. So it's she has an ability to hear voices that are from other entities and other places. And it's not something that I have personally, but she has this ability. So these are just shots of my setting up the cabinet in the Griffin Art space. And then the other elements of the project were cooked to like several cookbooks, and the cookbook, um, the Better Homes and Garden cookbook from the 60s. So it's that's something else that's part of the project, as well as you can't see in this photograph, but they're all of I transcribed a lot of her postcards and a few of her letters, and wrote them out on big sheets of 18 by 24 um, drawing paper. So they're like handwritten transcriptions of her letters and postcards to me as I've lived out here. Yeah, so we've got horse bookends, and she loves horses. And here's a picture of finding the Hoosier in the what is it called? The Mount Pleasant Furniture. This is like when we first set eyes on it, and then this is exploring the cabinet. And what it is this thing here. This is like a compartment where you're supposed to put your flour, and then you sift the flour. It's a flour sifter, and then there's other compartments. But what it's meant to be is an organizer. They're from the 1920s, and they're meant to like save you time, and you're meant to have like you've got this little table here, and you're meant to like just be able to have everything within arm's reach, instead of like walking around your kitchen gathering your materials and plates and stuff. Everything is stored in this cabinet. I'm just like, these are just pictures of like different items in the warehouse, just to like give you an idea of like just like so many different things to choose from. And I felt like for me, I was just like, oh well, like I was with Paul Wong, and he's like, what about these? And I'd be like, yes. But then I was like but then as I went along, I'm like, oh yeah, well, these little horse heads, they're speaking to me. And then it's like, oh, here's some cookbooks, and that like opened up my head. I'm like, oh yeah, the cookbook, my mom's cookbook. So then just like exploring all of these items, um, it opens up your own memories, right? And I'm like having all of these ideas and memories flooding in from growing up, and like old cans, like It reminds me a lot of my mom's house, so my grandma's house. Like this sort of like pale green color really reminds me of my grandmother. My grandmother loved plants. She had like really two big, beautiful gardens behind her house. So, like, part of the project, like I said, was I transcribed a lot of her postcards that she wrote to me as I've been living out here. And so this is one of I only transcribed the writing part. Like, I didn't like draw any of the actual what the postcards were about. And quite often there would be like a little description of like what it was being depicted on the opposite side, but it was seemed more important to have like a history or a family sort of story happening or emerging. So this one here, it says, "Hey Charlene, this is the last of the old postcards and my favorite." And I don't know what was. Oh, it was a couple of. Um, my mom's kind of funny. Um, this guy reminds me of both Bill and your dad because my parents got divorced. So she's talking about her boyfriend at the time. Rolled into one. I think you need to come home for a visit. I need a hug from you. So that's really sweet. So this is one of the cookbooks, and I did some little drawings where I altered some of the pictures in the cookbook, but I think this is going to be just like sort of like I did a little video of what the installation looks like. So I could share that with you right now. We'll walk through. And there's the other gingham ovoid inside.
Yeah, so I did 2 years there. Család előtte oda, és van a hozzám. So like, I don't need anything. I don't need to go to school. I like it now, I have my own, yeah. Also io 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 ti parlo servizio, invece se la vedere io la sono sempre in questo ci sta, cosa poi szóval csúcsnyelvűről, lefönni, egy év után már visszatérni, csak hallják, akkor a szélvési
Okay. I just got one more video here of the because I did this little cookbook, um, like a scrapbook, telling the story of my mom's haunting experiences. So just looking for it here. Here we are. And this work has like all different kinds of paper and like little scraps of things. And I tried to make it look like the cookbook. Has got some of the old cards that she sent me. I went through a period of fear. It's like 7 or 8. And then this is just like my items list of the things that I was going to put into my project, and then the all of the things that she was describing to me over the phone of what she had in her hoosier. And then this is a picture of us at a wedding. My mom is here in the polka dots, and then her mom is in the white. And then that's me as a teenager. And my aunt. And I think that's probably all I have to say. But wait, I've got one more. One second. This is a ham. And that's pretty much it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Charlene. That was there's a lot of cheekiness in this work, particularly with the haunting, the wonderful, almost owl-like figures in the opioids. Thank you for taking this time and sharing these two incredible projects with us. I knew they were being installed at the roughly the same time, but I didn't know quite how busy you were with both exhibitions being installed almost simultaneously. So kudos to you for that. And they're such different projects. So I guess that sort of segues me into my first question, and that's with the Hosier project and this combination of these ready-made materials with your own personal stories and your mom's history with this hosier. This was a project that came together in a very short period of time, but obviously comes from this longer history and relationship you have with your mom. And this project at Emily Carr, the Ovoid project, is something you've been working on since 2017. So I guess I'm wondering, when you start a new project, sort of what's your usual process? Do you begin with the concept or the material or something else entirely?
I think that with the Hoosier project, it definitely is like the object, but but really it was like it was the curatorial statement, right? When they're talking about objects and animism and things having their own life, right? Or taking on the life of the owner. And I was like, that's the thing that sort of like brought me to that idea, like, oh, this is like an example of like some sort of happening that happened for my mom. So it was just like, yeah, I can try to work with that, and then um, we can like research together or talk about things together, and then it can be like this yeah, like a project um, that will be something that is of our experience. So, and then with the ovoids, it's like maybe it's a little bit of a ready-made too, right? So it's like the ovoid is already out there. It's already there, and like the people are already here. The land is already here, and it's just me. I'm just like I just happen to be passing through, right? I'm just like a blip in the history of whatever it is that's happening here on the West Coast, and yeah, I hope that is it's like an engagement that's perceived as being humble and one of respect and love. So
Wonderful. Thank you. Um, and with that, how do you envision the audience to interact with this work, the Hosier Project? And are there particular engagements or responses that you're hoping to see from the audience?
um, I think I was really trying to like bring together um, like what my personal experience is, but then like this this object of like the Hoosier and what it represents in terms of, oh, it's like organization for like the housewife, right? And then it's like then the cookbook, oh, it's like how to make your life more efficient and how to like take care of your family in like a more efficient way, or how to organize your stuff, or like, so it's like and then there's also the element of nostalgia in the cookbook itself from like the 60s, and the ideal of like the housewife and women's work and all this stuff like that, which is just something that my mother didn't really want to engage with at all. Like she's like not of that sort of, she's like a working person, and she's always been there for her family, and she's a matriarch, and she's like really she's not into like the ideal of what the 50s or 60s housewife is, which some of the pictures depict like a woman with like a very small petite waist, and she has like a big bowed apron, and she wears her heels and that kind of thing. And my mom, she's like not that kind of person. She's like, I'm gonna get in my truck and I'm gonna go ride my horse. That's my mom. So
Incredible. Thank you. And it's incredible that it's this sort of almost reunion with you and Dana Warren at Libby Leshgold after your first and now this exhibition being her first as the director of the Aboriginal Gathering Place. And you mentioned being in the warehouse with Paul and him making these recommendations to you and that prompt of the curatorial text as sort of the catalyst for this project. So with that being said, sort of leading me into my question about how community and collaboration impacts your work, and if there's any other partnerships or communal projects that have particularly impacted your practice.
when it happens, it happens. And then it's like, I don't know when it will happen. And so it's like, uh, it's not something that I find really exciting is that I do have this really strong studio practice, but then I also have these opportunities that present themselves where it's like, oh, well, you can go here and you can like set your work up within these circumstances, and then you can have some people help you out, or you can like be engaged with like last summer I worked with the Gordon Smith Art for Kids summer camp, and we worked on this really big beautiful mural together, and it was like 100 campers. And so we like made this beautiful sewn fiber mural, and then we had them all make these little raku buttons out of clay, and then we sewed all the buttons on the work, and then they also made additional like uh, little things that I also sewed on, and then I had them come over and help me sew things onto the this big piece of green mesh. Um, so it's just like it happens, and then it's like but it's not something that is like planned. It is planned, but it's not something I necessarily like seek out and say, oh well, I've got this community project that I've it's just like it's something that sort of like more of an organic kind of thing that happens, and it's really energizing and fun to do. So it's nice that it was nice that I had help with the install, and it was fun to like have people's input, and the students made great suggestions and had lots of good questions, and so that was something that was like a lot of fun, and I was really happy for it because um, sometimes your work can really it can be like really involved and you can be too attached to it. So it was good to feel like, oh, I'm not going to be attached to it. And they can start just like putting things up in the wall, and then we can like reconfigure things. And yeah, so it's like it's exciting when your work is taking on a different form, or it's taken out of your hands. So that's something that's exciting about it.
And yeah, it sort of just goes with the flow.
Yeah, yeah. Trying like trying not to be so because I think with like a lot of the sewn work, it's very meticulous, and it's very like I want things to be a certain way, and that kind of thing. And then to have the install be completely not that, it's like it's very liberating. So
It is, you've spent all that labor sewing and then you sort of set it off into the world, and it from there takes on a life of its own in the install.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. And it was nice to work with my mom as well, with her stories, and put those in a particular like framework, and have them be there and exist and to like voice them as well, like speak them and have it be part of my oral history, really. And yeah, she's like a huge influence in my life. And I think I made a joke in the art talk on Sunday about my writing being like hers, right? And not realizing it until I wrote out all of her letters. And I'm like, oh my God, my writing is so much like hers. And I didn't realize that. So it was like a funny revelation to like think, oh, like I'm like more like my mom than I even really understand.
It takes little moments like this in your practice to sort of step back and really realize that influence and the care and love that comes with that influence.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Charlene, for taking the time to share these amazing projects with us. And we hope that you come by to Griffin and view the exhibition Prop House, which will be up until August 18th. And the work at the Libby Leshgold is currently exhibited right now. So I wish
Yeah,
you
that's until June 30th. So, and I think we're having an art talk on the 27th through the 28th.
amazing. We will link below in the YouTube for everyone who's interested. Wonderful. Thank you, Charlene, and thank you to the audience for listening.
Yeah, thank you.